that I wanted to introduce you guys to is what I would like to call a day in the life of an editor, just to give you an idea of what you're up against. So in my day, I work 7 days a week. I work on weekends and holidays. I don't get a day off, ever. And I get a lot of emails every day from people pitching to me. So how many people here get 50 emails a day? Right? 100? 150? 200? 300 emails a day. So your email is going to be in my inbox. So just remember that when you're pitching to me or to anyone, any other editor or journalist that you want to tell your story. So essentially, there are probably 4 opportunities every day that you can get to me. But in between, I'm figuring out what the most newsworthy thing of the day is. I'm checking my email. I am editing and publishing 10 to 50 blogs. I'm arguing with the front page editors so that the stories that I have chosen will get seen. I am then editing and publishing 10 to 15 stories, working with my team of interns. I have like between 4 and 7 interns at a given time. My team of writers, setting the editorial schedule for them, forcing everyone to rewrite everything that they've already written, also checking email. That's where you come in again. Then for the rest of the day, I design those top things that are at the top of every page, the colors and pictures that go with that. Doing social media for Facebook and Twitter, which we can talk about later, how you can get in touch that way. Answering all of our current bloggers, saying, where's my blog? Why did my blog say this? Why haven't you written back to me? Hiring new interns, because of course we can only keep interns for 3 months legally. Developing my sources, maintaining all the content relationships that I have from organizations like yourselves. And again, arguing with front page editors and checking email, and that's where you come in again. So the point of this is to show you do have an opportunity several times every day to reach an editor, but you better make some real good pitches during that time, or otherwise we're just going to delete what you say. So that's the first thing to scare you and to start you thinking. So this is my favorite part of the presentation. I had a pretty good time pulling all this together. And it's kind of hard to see this stuff, but you know, we can talk about it later too, or I can pass it on just for posterity. I pulled together some of the worst pitches I've received. Some of them are extremely corporate, which may not be the issue here, but I think the overall theme of the bad pitches are pretty universal. So this one is a pitch with the headline, "Supermodels Unite to Bring Solar Power to Hospitals in Haiti." I don't know if this is funny to anyone else, but this is hilarious to me. So for a second, I thought this was a great pitch, because I was like, what if all the supermodels went to Haiti and they're like building solar power things? No, no, they're selling their dresses for charity. So this has absolutely no, no bearing on my audience, or most audiences. So the first thing you want to think about is what you're pitching something that people can connect to? This is something that most people can't connect to because it's very superficial. Not because there's supermodels involved, but because the whole idea is very superficial. So the first thing that I look at this and see, I think, way too fake. So make sure that what you're pitching to begin with is something strong and authentic that a readership can connect to. Okay, here's another favorite of mine. Ralph Lauren and the Michael J. Fox Foundation are making dog tags, you know, like the kind that you can wear around your neck as a fashion statement, for $95 each, and you can support a charity with that product. Yes, I want to go out and buy that dog tag. Okay, so this is something that, for the vast majority of us, this is a product that they're pushing into the market that will not reach the majority of our audience. I, as someone with a middling income as an editor, would not be able to afford this product even for charity, and I assume that my readership cannot too. So if you're pushing a product that represents your company or cause, remember that, again, it has to be something that people can connect to. Because of this, I would say that this is too niche for a general audience. If you were promoting this to a fashion website, that would be perfect. If you were promoting it specifically to a blog that follows a kind of product, like necklaces, or they're following the news of Ralph Lauren or what have you, that niche audience would happily take this pitch. But a general national niche audience like the Huffington Post, or probably like most of the papers that you're going to pitch to, will not be interested in this cause. Okay. Oh, this one is a little bit more common. So this was pitched to an associate editor of mine, Jesse. And this is actually a pretty interesting pitch. They're putting together, this was for our education section, so they're putting together a roundtable about a school district, and they have given us all kinds of information about the school district. It has 7 middle schools, 5 high schools, 34,000 students, and it's being promoted by a technology company. Nowhere in this pitch does it say what the roundtable is about. So remember that when you're pitching, you have one chance in my 4 times a day that I check email to explain everything about your organization. So you want to clearly and succinctly present information about your cause. So let's see. Oh, here's another one I really liked. This would be new headquarters and clam bake for charity. Yeah. Again, as a nonprofit leader, I understand you are so excited about every new thing that happens in your organization. But my audience from Alabama to Tuscaloosa to San Francisco does not care about your clam bake. They care about what you're doing to raise money, why you're raising money at the clam bake. They care why you just moved, where is this? In Austin, Texas, and why you're moving your headquarters there. This is a great organization. I actually really like Comfort the Children, but nowhere in here did they say, we have moved to this location because our new constituency is there. And we know that we need to help people in that area, and that's why we're moving there. And this is the one girl who inspired us to do that. There is nothing here except, oh, I'm sorry, it's a crawfish boil. So there is nothing here except information about the crawfish boil and how they built this really wonderful new center, which I'm sure is beautiful. But for a national audience, it really has no bearing on our audience. Now, if they were to pitch this to a local paper in Austin, that could definitely get some traction because that's now an event. That's an event that they can invite people to go to. So again, you want to start thinking about your audience and your editor, who you are pitching to and why their audience would care, not just why you care that your cause is in the paper. So, too local. This one is another one that's a little less obvious, and again, a pretty good cause. This one is about an awards luncheon, and I do get a lot of event pitches. And again, that works for local papers. So if you have an event, you want to tap into all of your local media. But as a national interest, you need to find something that people who can't attend your event can relate to. In this case, this is another education pitch. And this is an awards ceremony that focuses on minority education and discusses basically, what was their line? Oh, this is a story about generations of talented, underrepresented youth of color. So there's absolutely no news peg here. As much as I want to promote the rising up of generations of people who haven't had opportunities, there are ways to do that in a way that feels pegged to current news and to current issues. So if you're presenting a topic, you need to make sure that if you want press there, that there's a way that they can spin that so it feels new and fresh and interesting to their audience. This right here feels more like a research paper pitch. You can do a historical analysis, but you can't necessarily do event coverage based on history. So if they have a new solution that they're promoting, that's the news peg. If they have one person who they're highlighting who's broken out of their specific circumstance that has risen up that they're honoring, that's the story that they should tell. But to start talking about the whole history of an issue, you don't have anything as a writer that you can go on to build this into something that people will want to read. So, too vague. And okay, now this last one is my favorite. I just threw this in because it was so bizarre. Artist recycles World War II glass eyes to help the blind. Yes, I get these every day. So sometimes you're thrown an absolute curveball. In this case, I think they were donating 10% of the profits of these used prosthetic eye paperweights to charity for the blind. So while this was highly entertaining to my editorial team, I'm not sure that I would really want to pass this on to a larger audience. So again, if you're pitching something that's off the wall, make sure that it either has a news peg or something deeply interesting that you can market to a wide audience. In this case, if they were raising vast amounts of money selling these, that would be a story. But in general, this would probably go on the weird news section of the Huffington Post. So, too weird. Okay, so now that I've crushed your dreams about your own prosthetic eye paperweights that you were planning to sell for charity, I do have some strong advice about what you should be thinking about for a pitch. And what I'm about to tell you is less about crafting an email or a tweet or talking to someone in person. We can talk, that all depends on your individual situation and how you want to communicate that to your editor. However, there are very specific tenets, I guess you would say, of a good pitch that are universal no matter how you communicate them. So, good pitches feel authentic. Like I said before, no one cares that supermodels are selling their dresses for charity. That's about as much work as, well, that's no work for them. They probably just hand it off to someone and then they sell it for charity. If there was a story about supermodels going to Haiti and installing solar-powered fixtures in a school, that would feel authentic because at least we know that they've taken the time to go down there and hopefully they can share something that doesn't feel just like a press appearance. So getting down to the rest of us who aren't supermodels, make sure that what you're pitching is something that your readership can connect to, that your future supporters can connect to, because that's why you're trying to get publicized, I would hope. So there are many ways to find authenticity in your story, but that's the first thing that you should be looking for. The second is have a personality. I know from my own organization, there are a lot of citizen journalism organizations out there. And there are a lot of other organizations that do similar things. In fact, we're all fighting for funding, so I'm sure you have all experienced that at one time or another and gotten a little angry that the organization that was exactly like yours got the grant that you didn't. Not that I'm bitter. But the difference between organizations or individual causes are the faces that are put on them. So that personality can be the personality of your organization, how you set your tone and mission, how you present your cause in a way that people can connect to and understand in a more valuable and personal way than other organizations. Or it can be the person, the face of your organization. That can be the founder, that can be the person who knows the most, that can be just someone who volunteers a lot with your organization and has connected individually with the people that you serve. But make sure that when you're pitching a story, you have a face to go with it. because every story requires either interviews or someone to write their own story. So make sure that before you even jump into that new endeavor of pitching people, that you have a face that you can connect and put in front of all the media in the world. Good pitches teach something. If you're a nonprofit leader, which I think probably all of us are in this room, or at least a leader of a cause that you believe in, you have something to teach to other people. Or the person that you're working with or the cause that you're working with has something to teach. So you want to make sure that what you're pitching is showing something new to the world, showing something different, a new perspective. Just like the same way we all read a favorite genre of books, but every book is a little bit different. You may be reading 100 murder mysteries a year, but each one is a little bit different. So you want to find your voice and your expertise in a way that can be valuable to others. Finally, your pitch should be newsworthy. And this doesn't mean that it has to be breaking news, but this just means that you need to find that kernel of current events, something that you can tie into, what's going on in the world, so that there's some urgency for an editor to pick up your pitch and say, we want to publish this now. That's not to say that a good story that lasts a long time won't ever be published, but I will definitely tell you from experience that if I have a choice between a story about the development of an organization over many years, for example, versus a child who just graduated out of XYZ organization and is doing this cool project that I'm very impressed by, I'm going to go with the recently graduated kid first, because that kid only graduates once. That organization is constantly evolving. So you want to find a news peg and something that you can go with to launch your story at the time at which you want it publicized. So now that you have, hopefully in your head, figured out the type of pitch that you want to present, there are a few ways you can do it. Okay, this one I like to call the come to Jesus moment. And I'm going to go through all of these, but I'll present them all first to you. So first is the come to Jesus moment, which I'll explain in a minute. The second is expert advice, which we went over a little bit, but I'll explain more in detail. And the third is newsworthy opinion. And the come to Jesus moment can work in two ways. Whatever it is, it's an anecdote. It's explaining to people who aren't familiar with your cause or want to learn more about your cause why that cause is important, through your eyes or through someone that you're helping. So this is, again, where you either find your personality and bring out that moment at which you decided to start a tutoring company for low-income students, or in my case, a citizen journalism organization that helped people in minority and underrepresented areas around the world. What was the one thing that made you say, I need to do this? What made you quit your job? What made you go recruit all your friends and family and beg them for money? What made the person you helped able to say, this organization changed my life? So I can give you a couple of great examples of when this worked. And what I'm going to show you are blogs, but the pitches that got to this point are what caught my attention. And I'm going to show you the finished product, but again, I'd like to stress, it doesn't matter the shape of the email you send or how you get in touch with someone. It matters what you have to say. So these are the finished products of people who had really fantastic come to Jesus moments. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Mark Horvath. If you're not, he's fantastic. Mark is a homeless advocate who was homeless himself. Just like us, he had a day-to-day job that he was good at, got into some trouble, ended up on the streets, and he wrote a really incredible blog about how he ended up homeless, that first night for him, what it meant to him. And that was eventually what prompted his organization. This got a huge response because he's now a really strong nonprofit leader and he's doing some pretty incredible stuff on his own. But he exposed that part of him that was really deeply meaningful to his audience. And it helped people connect with him and help them connect with his cause. Another great example of this is one of our bloggers. His name is Luke White. We originally did a story about him, and now he blogs for us because Luke used to work for a newspaper, or it might be an online newspaper, that specifically covers correctional facility issues. And day after day, he was reading about a lot of the problems going on in jails and prisons across California, and he just decided, I can't sit here and not do anything about this. So Luke quit his job, and now he's traveling up and down the coast of California, interviewing everyone involved in California correctional facilities. And he is doing an incredible job of interviewing people and through their own words presenting their stories of how they got into jail, what they're doing as they're getting out of jail, and in a really simple, profound way presenting a huge issue for our state and our country in a really graceful, easy to consume way that's very powerful. So again, this isn't his personal come to Jesus moment, but this is the moment where this woman that he's interviewing realized, I made a mistake. This is how I got to this place. How am I going to get out? And he's collecting these together as a way to create change in the correctional facility genre of California. A last one, and this is another one where people say, like, oh, you know, if you get a face to your organization, you're going to lose some authenticity, what have you. You know, everyone wants a celebrity for their cause or a face that people can recognize. And oftentimes, it doesn't work out so well because people don't communicate things in a way that people can connect to, or they're just like at a celebrity auction, like selling something or introducing someone, and it doesn't feel very powerful. But Naomi Harris, for a new movie that she is working on, actually went to, I believe, Kenya. Good, I found it. She went to Kenya, and she actually worked as a teacher in Kenya for several weeks before playing one in a new movie that she's working in. And her blog actually was incredibly powerful because it was about a person being dropped into a situation that she had absolutely no previous connection with. And she was really able to show us as readers how she felt about the situation, the troubles that she went through and now understood more fully and communicated that and was able to direct people to an organization that she thought would help the children that she taught for those weeks. So I will never say to you that a call to action at the bottom of a post is a bad thing. You can ask for money all you want, but you better have a really good story to get people into it before you ask for that money, or else people are never going to read what you write again. So that brings us to expert advice. Now, the thing that I love to communicate about expert advice is that it's not just about your successes. I can go on all day long about the people that I've heard tell me, oh, my company is doing so well. Oh, my cause is doing so well. We do such great things. What did you mess up? I'll tell you what I messed up in my own organization. We went to Iraq for 3 months, and we didn't bring enough money. And then we didn't put it in a very safe place, so it got stolen. So we had to eat pancake mix for 3 weeks while we taught a bunch of kids. I got really skinny. It was a horrible experience. But I can safely say, in the future, if you are ever working in a developing region of the world, here's what you should do with your money. Also, here's how you get your bank, who freezed your assets, to unfreeze your assets while you're in a war zone. I can share a lot of that stuff with you. That, I think, is way more interesting than just talking about, oh, we taught 20 people in a class these great skills. That I can share with you, too. But if you're in a war zone and you want to get your bank assets unfrozen, you're probably going to want to learn from my mistakes. I bet everyone in this room has had that moment where they're sitting there with their hands empty, just saying, where can I get that advice from? I don't know what to do right now. So, as an expert, you have been through that. So find those moments that you can share with other people from the mistakes that you've learned from and make that information available. You're not going to look silly for making the mistakes. You're going to look good for sharing them and learning from them. So one example of this in a non-mistake way, but a very helpful way, is the founder of the Taproot Foundation. He did a really interesting blog on how to expand nonprofits and about tools that he's found to open several different branches very quickly. That's something that a lot of people can learn from, and something that maybe a lot of us didn't realize we had that knowledge to do, because every day we work through problems and we don't realize that other people are working through those same problems at the same time. Another great one, this is my stalwart example of sharing failures. Charity Water, everyone probably has heard of them. So every year they do a fundraiser. They call it like their birthday fundraiser. It's in September, and I don't know who came up with the idea, but every year they do a live televised broadcast of a well drilling to create a well in rural Africa. Now, that boggles my mind. There are so many problems with that. But of course, as we said, sure, we'll host your live well drilling. That sounds cool. We got an email the hour before. We're running a little behind. An hour later, they're like, we are not going to be able to go live with this. Give us 2 hours. This went on for about 8 hours. Then they were like, scratch it. We can't do it. Disaster. So the cool thing about this is that they didn't just hang their heads and try to make everyone forget that this happened. Scott Harrison wrote a really interesting blog about everything that went wrong. And the cool thing about this is that he was totally honest about doing volunteer work in a developing region, which is really hard. And that's one of the things that especially, I'm not sure if anyone here does international work, but even in our own communities, on a day-to-day basis, we want to make things look easy. We want to make it look like we're taking every, donor's dollar and putting it to good use, and you just helped that kid have a week's meals, and now that family has clean water, and look at all the great stuff we're doing. But a lot of times, you need a little extra padding of money. You need a little extra give, because stuff like this is going to happen. And in his case, Scott Harrison thought, you know what, I'm just going to put it out there, because anyone in my position is probably going through the same thing, and every donor should know the difficulties that it takes and the way that we as volunteers, as people who are invested in a cause, put ourselves and our reputation on the line for the cause that we're investing in. So that really contributes to a sense of transparency, which again relates back to authenticity. If you can't admit to your mistakes, there are probably some other things that you're probably not admitting in your organization. Maybe. I won't accuse anyone of anything. Finally, we have newsworthy opinion. So newsworthy opinion is not just you going on and on about whatever your passion is on a day-to-day basis and harping on the same thing that only you care about. This is taking a current event of the day or the biggest story of the week or whatever is really going on that people are talking about and lending your expert opinion on that to give depth and focus to something that's important to you. So a great example of that is probably most of the people in this room followed the Greg Mortensen scandal. He wrote 3 Cups of Tea. Someone recently released a novella-length comeback, if you will, called 3 Cups of Deceit, where he claimed that a lot of what Greg Mortensen was doing with his organization was untrue. This threw the world into a tizzy because every person who was helping, especially children abroad, were really afraid that no one would invest in their cause anymore. So there were a lot of bloggers on our site who came out, who ran organizations and said, here's how I feel about this. This is the problem that we face as an organization because of this. Or, here's why maybe I'm on his side a little bit, because things aren't as cut and dry as this 3 cups of deceit trying to make it. So in this case, Jim Zolkowski, I don't want to butcher his name, really broke down the single issue of Greg Mortensen's foundation into something greater of what do you do when you have, a subject that people connect to? How do you know that you're not exploiting the people that you're trying to help? Which is a much larger issue, but it's one that's really interesting and one that wasn't well covered in the news. But this really took a single issue and brought it up to something greater, established him as an expert on that, and was able to bring his name and organization into its own limelight for a few minutes, which is our average news day. You can go a totally different way. Brock Cohen, one of my favorite education bloggers, he's an amazing guy. He's a public school teacher, and he has a lot to say about what's going on in the education reform movement. And so when Waiting for Superman came out, he was just like, I can't stand this, but if I sit there and harp on the same issues, no one's going to listen. So he just took the idea and ran with it and did a total satire of what it would be like if someone did come in and try to change everything for the better and what that would look like in an average day in a public school. It didn't turn out very well. The day in the public school, not the blog. The blog was great. So remember to be creative in the way that you're presenting things. I'm not saying write a short story with fictional characters for everything, but play to your own strengths and methods of presentation to be able to tell the story that you think the world should hear. So, everyone with me so far? Okay. So now that you kind of have an idea of what kind of topic you want to pitch, how you want to phrase your pitch, now you have to find an editor to pitch to. So, my biggest suggestion, if you are trying to build a long-term relationship with a publication, is to not blanket the entire news industry with your press release. The key is really to know thy editor. Figure out the publication that you want to be featured in, the one that's going to be valuable for your audience. And start to get to know that publication, what it features and doesn't feature. The person who's featuring, oftentimes people will pitch one of our sections and go around to every different person in the section. But there's only one person who makes the final decision, me. So every time one of my associate editors get pitched, it goes back to me. So make sure that you do your homework to find out who the correct editor is that you should be pitching. It's okay to use a contact that you may have in a different part of a company that you want to pitch. So for example, if you're trying to pitch the Boston Globe on something, I'm not sure why you'd want to pitch the Boston Globe if you live out here, but we'll use it as an example. And you only know the economics editor, it's okay to contact them and say, can you put me in touch with the right person, or can you pass this on? But you want to make sure that you're creating as strong a pitch as possible to the specific section and person that you want to be featured in. Because otherwise, you get lost in the mix of many, many editors on a daily basis, especially for online publications, because online publications tend to be very disjointed in how things are published. We don't talk to each other. So if you pitch one side of the organization and expect it to get to another, they're never going to see it. So make sure you know your editor and what they like to publish. Don't waste their time. As I said before, as you saw in my schedule, editors are really busy. And we don't want to get emails being like, I have this idea, what do you think of it? Here's a draft of my pitch. There's another person who I was thinking of having in it, but like they're out of town for the next 3 weeks. When you decide to make your pitch, you want everything together. You want to be able to just step up and throw it all down and say, here's what I got. This is why you have to do it right now. This is why I'm awesome, and go for it. If you start asking a million questions, we're just going to delete. So make sure that you have everything together before you make that pitch and know what you're talking about before you make that pitch. As I said before, you want to choose the right media outlets for your cause and pitch the right stories at the right time. So for example, you may have come up with a new technology or a new way of helping your community that would be perfect for a local blog or a local newspaper, or maybe to introduce at a specific event that's sponsored by a media outlet. That pitch is not perfect for a national publication. So every pitch is not a one-size-fits-all pitch. And in fact, you should really think about how to construct a pitch that fits a specific section of a specific publication. So make sure that you're doing your homework before you start blanketing the media with what you want to say. So now that I said all that, here's a great example of a pitch that I got just a little while ago. So this person figured out what my education section is about and what I wanted. He looked through everything that I featured on there, and right up there he said, here's who I want to pitch to have a blog on this. Here's why it would add to your section from what you don't already have. Here's his background. Here's his photo, and then he also says in there that he has additional media. So by the end of this, I'm like, well, I don't have any extra questions except when can I get in touch with this guy? They answered everything in advance. So don't write a novel-length email, but make sure that you preemptively answer those questions and know what to say if I say, well, how do you think this fits into my page? So a lot of times I get people saying, I have this really great college professor who would add wonderful insight into college issues. And I say, well, that's great, but I only do K through 12 education. So make sure that you know what is being covered on the section that you're pitching and very clearly illustrate why what you're pitching can add to that. So you found an editor, let's say. Now what? Be prepared for the story that you just pitched. I can't tell you how many times I've said, this is awesome, we want to set up an interview for tomorrow or in 2 days from now. And the person pitching me says, oh, well, actually, our founder is out of the country for the next month and a half. Or, well, we'll have to get back to you on any pictures that we have. And also, we can't have anyone who's been through our nonprofit program speak to you because they're too busy. So be prepared to provide additional details about your story. In that case, if you're pitching a blog or you're pitching some kind of editorial, make sure that you have, if not written already, you have that piece of work almost ready to go, outlined, know what you want to do, because oftentimes if I'm ready to take your story, or if a publication is ready to take your story, they want it right away. So if you're toying with these grand ideas and you just want to see what's out there, that's not the time to make the pitch. You want to really develop what your message is before you take it to an editor. Okay, this one is outrageously important, and I can't stress it enough. Have media available when you pitch your story. I have often chosen a story with media over an equal story with no media, just because that's the way our publication works. We need a picture with every story. If we can't find a way to illustrate your story, we can't publish it. Or we're going to take a stock photo from, you know, two children like looking like they're having fun or something as like a kind of blasé fill-in for what would have been an amazing photo from your organization. So make sure that you have photos ready to go. And if you're making videos, which I know there are a lot of storytelling seminars here, and probably a lot of them had to do with multimedia. If you're making videos, for the love of God, make them embeddable. Because if everyone has to go to your site to look at the videos, no one's ever going to see the videos. No one reads nonprofit sites like a newspaper. Remember that. No one will go to your site unless they're directed specifically to it for some reason or another. That's why you're creating this pitch, to direct people to your cause. So the more easily transferable your media is, the more likely your story is going to get picked up. Oh, also, make sure that all the people in your pictures, especially if they're underage, have already signed a disclaimer saying that they're allowed to be in pictures, because otherwise we can't use them. And that's something that people forget a lot of the time. Or don't borrow pictures from other people and give them to us, because also that's bad and illegal. Okay, so if you've gotten this far and you've already pitched and your editor has picked up a story, I hope that there's a cause that you're leading them to. In many cases, this is going to be to donate or to follow someone on Facebook, follow your cause on Facebook. Pick your cause and make it very clear, because it's very likely that the person who's interviewing you or allowing you to share on their site is going to want you to give a way that people can take action or get involved. Even if they don't, people are going to then go to your site, which is exactly what you want them to do, or to contact you directly, depending on what your cause or personal affiliation is to what you're pitching. In that case, you want to have something to tell them. So I've been pitched many times from people who say, we want people to donate, but we have no way to donate yet. That is not the time to make your pitch. Set up your PayPal account first, or your bank account, or whatever you need to do. The pitch is the last thing. So make sure that you have a simple and clear call to action right on the front of your website, a big donate button, a big follow us on Facebook, whatever you want to do, volunteer. We love volunteering. But have that very clear on your site and have that ready, top of your mind when you're being interviewed or when you're explaining your cause in a media outlet. Finally, and this is kind of one that is more open to discussion and probably something that you discussed in other panels today, but you should probably have a greater goal for why you're making this pitch. To have 100,000 people follow you on Facebook is great, but what are you doing with that? And what do you plan on using with that donation money? How are you going to use it? Make sure that you're able to readily explain that greater goal, which should be an integral part of your organization, but make sure that you have, a quick 2-sentence explanation of what you want for the future, why you want supporters, and why after reading about you or watching you on TV, they're going to want to become a supporter of you. So make sure that that's included as well in your overall pitch and when you get up there and stick your neck out for your cause. So that concludes the presentation part. This is all my information, but I wanted to open it up to everyone for their own questions. What I didn't touch on is social media, and I can talk a little bit about that before I open it up to questions. But one of the big things that people ask is, can you pitch over Facebook? Can you pitch on Twitter? LinkedIn? I think, and we can talk about this some more, but I think that, again, everything that I've said here really applies in all forms of pitching, that you have to be respectful of the person that you're pitching to and really understand why you're making that pitch at that time. Some of the pitches that work best through social media is relating a story that's already been printed to a story that you want the publication to tell. So for example, if you're an organization that serves underserved youth in an area and a publication publishes a story about another organization that does that, say, I have a great story for you, but this is how my story is different. So you want to make sure, again, that all of the things that we talk about apply to every form of pitching. So that's all I got.